Recording. Cool. So welcome to Metagov seminar. Today's presentation will be with one of Metagov's research directors, Amber Case, who leads the Comtech Institute and is going to share about their work with us, both Comtech related and some of their research beyond that as well. So I'm super excited to have Case here today, and I'll pass the mic to you.
Hi everyone, nice to see you all or meet you if I haven't seen you. Um, let's see if I can get this shared nicely. No, it's Zoom. Maybe I'll just share my desktop. Can you see the presentation? Okay, great. So this presentation is about calm technology and what the mind needs, and there will be some neuroscience in it. I'm trying to integrate a little bit more. There's just a lot of information, so I don't want to overwhelm everyone. Um, so we'll get started. My
Hey,
name
Case,
is,
we see it. Sorry, we see it as like a small box
hmm,
and like the next slide thing, maybe.
how about that?
Yeah, that's great.
Great. All right, sorry, let me fix terrible sounds. There's a light. Okay, so now you can see this just okay? Okay, great. So my name is Amber Case. I am the founder of the Calm Tech Institute. We are the very first certification that looks at how much attention it takes for someone to use a piece of technology. And then we award people a different score based on our 81 criteria. So we have primary attention, peripheral attention, how it feels to touch something or experience something in your peripheral attention. There's durability. Does the technology work even when it fails or the company goes out of business? Light, is it a bright blue piercing LED or is it a nice orange glow so it doesn't keep you up at night? Sound, does the sound work with or against the product? And then there's materials. What is the product made from? How did it get there? Who made it and were they treated well? So this will be a little subset just about texture and periphery. So first, I think everyone's seen many of these posts about how design has changed over time. We've gone from fully articulated interfaces where almost everything is a button and you don't have to look when you're driving a car to determine basic basically anything you need to do in a car. And if you get a rental car, it doesn't take you that long, usually, to figure out how to drive the car. Similar to learning how to ride a bike, it takes a while to learn initially, and then you kind of have it for life. Um, but with a newer car where there's a touchscreen, there isn't really a lot of muscle memory and cognitive anchoring that you can have. And so this is a big issue because the interface could change at any time, and you have to take your eyes off the road, off of your primary attention, destroy all those little variables that you have about oncoming speed and what's going on in your decision making to look at the screen, figure out what you need to do. So, what's changed since the iPhone? I wrote my thesis on the iPhone in 2007 when it came out, especially about the flat screen and how that would affect how we might experience um, technology. And what I noticed was a lot of times I went to San Francisco to study early iPhone purchasers, and I noticed that they would be walking their dogs and they would put their dogs on pause as they tapped this glass screen. But what I noticed more was that people had to look at their phone more to use it instead of just communicate through it. Instead of becoming kind of a pass-through interface where, like a good pair of glasses, you would look through the glasses in order to see the world, you were going into the device versus a BlackBerry where you are using these physical buttons and passing through the device in order to communicate with someone. So of course the iPhone and a lot of this design came from Dieter Rams and his industrial minimalism. As you can see, the calculator, the Braun calculator that he designed, is also the old calculator app on the iPhone. And what's interesting is back then, of course, you had these nice gradations. So it was a little bit, it looked like a physical device with physical articulated buttons. And the problem is that that's you don't get any of the physical articulated buttons. You just get a skeuomorphism. Even that's better for your mind than complete flat buttons. But this industrial minimalism works if you have a physical object. Once you have a digital object, it looks like it's sleek and industrial and extremely expensive, like it was when it came out, or extremely modern when it came out, but it doesn't feel that way to your mind once you use it. And there's a huge difference between buying a piece of tech based on how it looks and buying a piece of tech based on how it feels after 3 years. Do you get better at the tech over time, or do you get worse? So my question is, was the smooth world a mistake? This obsession with making everything flat and smooth, that it's cheaper in a Tesla to make the all of the buttons, you don't have to physically articulate them, they can just be a flat screen. And distracted driving is literally a loss of touch in a sense. Um, so I think overall, we're experiencing a huge loss of dimensionality, texture, and experience in our environments, and especially color. And of course, you can see this chart, which has gone all over the web about car colors by year starting to really decline. And now everything is looking black and gray and white and a little bit of red and blue, especially in the United States. So an average parking lot starting to look like this. Good luck finding your car at night. And everything is really gone flat. So here's some more products. These products will work forever because they're physical products and they're designed very well. Um, but I'd like to bring up a couple of concepts from Greek history. One is Chronos time and one is Kairos time. So loosely translated, Chronos time is the time there's this kind of either waiting time or industrial time where you have a schedule from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. and you're doing something. It's very mechanical time. It's kind of the time that industrial schools are run on with a bell. Um, but this is not the time that you remember on your deathbed. This is not the time that you choose to write poetry about. This is kind of the time of this stupid piece of tech that you expect to work because it's smart stopped working, and it's that maintenance time that you have to push through before you can actually use the product on the way to doing something else. That's Chronos time. Whereas Kairos time is the time you forget about time. It's the human time that you remember on your deathbed, like looking at a sunset or holding a loved one's hand for the first time. And I think that tech was supposed to give us back more of this human time. And for the last, I would say, at least 15 years or so, it's been focused more on the tech than it's been focused on actually just being useful. So when tech is center stage and it's the star of the show and it's the star of the commercials, our time and our experience of time is no longer really that centered anymore. So my big, the only thing that you should take home with this presentation is that our hands have eyes too. And it's so much advertising and so much of how we make technology choices is based on our eyes. Oh, that interface is ugly, I'm not going to use it. Or that's outdated, or oh, that spreadsheet's lame, so I'm going to use Airtable, or something like that. But more importantly, our hands have eyes too, and every time you grab something like, like this hair clip, there's so much going on that's connected to our mind that we can really become um, much more bonded to an object if it has texture and affordance and buttons and all sorts of differentiations. Now, this is made of plastic, but at least it looks kind of cool. But if this was made of real material, then it would be a completely different relationship. This might be an heirloom. So the materiality really matters because your hands can touch that. And that material honesty or dishonesty can bond us to something or not, kind of like a luxury vinyl plank floor or an old hewn oak floor. So you can close your eyes and look at all sorts of different fabric with your hands. And in your mind, there's all sorts of information. going into different parts of your brain. And that's really, really important because in a sense, it kind of makes you feel much more awake and in place than just touching the glass of a screen the whole time. Um, because there's not really anything there except for the case. So this is one of my favorite artists, Paula Sugati. So Paula went around the world and said, I'm going to take everything that everybody touches, so person by person, throughout the whole day, from when they wake up to when they go to sleep, and I'm going to arrange it on a big sheet, and this is going to be, what people touch every day. And she does the project less and less because what she noticed was that here's someone having a really nice day, sweeping and like with an old broom, and you have like really nice diet and going to the beach, right? Hooray. But if you were to do this now, and what she noticed more and more is there's less and less objects being touched. And if you were to rate these objects based on size of how many times they've been touched per day, the iPhone or the Android or any flat screen device would outweigh all of them. And the thing about these things that this person's touching here is that all of them have something that's attached to the mind, and it's this beautiful relationship of being in the world. So I like to ask people, what does your dog do when you take it on a walk? It's obsessed with all of the other information in its environment. It needs these status updates from all the other dogs. This is their social media. You take it around the block, and it's, oh yeah, oh look at this new thing, and oh this person was here. Oh, I better say I was here too. Ooh, first post. It's a very very exciting time for the dog. Um, but what we forget is that humans do this too. In the past, when we had more local communities and we were in smaller groups, we would walk around our environment in the morning. It would be either checking livestock if people were on a farm, checking plants, checking household. Um, if you do building maintenance, you would check a building. But before, you would check nature, and you'd understand, if you're 5 years old, the indicator plant that you planted to understand the pH of the soil so that you could plant something in the future. There's all sorts of information in your natural environment that's giving you so much in your peripheral attention. And now when we wake up in the morning, we want to do the same. We want to walk around the block and see what's in our local community, but a lot of times we don't really have a local community. So we go into our phone and this endless cornucopia of information that's unending, trying to get informed about all the recent changes. And our minds are built to understand such tiny nuance, which is why people become wine sommeliers and things like that. There's not actually these huge, bright, shiny things that we need. But when we wake up in the morning and we need something, it's much easier to go to other people's thoughts instead of our own, and there's no real local anymore. It's just become kind of global. So what does the mind really need? Well, it needs this. It needs to be walking around in totally differentiated environments with lots and lots of fractals, lots and lots of nature, real air, water, flowing things, things that change over time, exploring and discovering, and basically being a bit of a kid. And I think another important thing is that our feet have eyes too. I was on a computer just way too much a couple years ago, and I went a little crazy, and this is in New York City, so I just ran all over a park. I took a stick and just took it around a tree to kind of like feel the texture on the tree through the stick. And after about like a half an hour of this, just like rah, I could feel where in my mind it was almost like a screensaver had turned on. It was almost like my brain had only seen the same type of interfaces again and again, and my hands had only touched the same type of glass and physical keys again and again. And running around a train getting variable input under my feet and on my hands made me feel okay again. And and it's really important to think about this too because we almost lost the foot pedal from the Industrial Revolution. Like we can use a foot pedal through playing a piano, we can use it in a car, we can use it in a trash can, and we can use it in a sewing machine. But we don't use it on a computer. So we're almost missing a limb, and you don't have to look to use a foot. But the very first mouse by Doug Engelbart actually had a foot pedal, so you could scroll down the page. So imagine what it would have been if we didn't lose that appendage. Less repetitive stress, probably. So this is the natural garden at Portland, Japanese Gardens in Portland, Oregon, and Francesca Snyder, who is the maintainer of the natural garden, has this to say about it. She says, "It's funny how much work you need to take in order to make something look natural, and people will not see any of the work that I do. They will experience it, and that's what it's all about." And I think that's really the important thing about what we can do today in design is that we can put a lot of work in behind the scenes so that something feels natural, so that something feels incredible. And no one will see that work, but they'll just experience it. This term nature deficit disorder, I like this much better than ADD because, it's almost like a joke. Oh, I have this ADD or da da da. And I was talking with someone at Microsoft where I was helping with the inclusive design toolkit that came out, which is a really incredible toolkit about um, people with temporary, situational, and permanent disabilities, and how to make software and hardware that works for everybody, where you might not have access to your arm because there's a baby in it, or it's broken, or you don't have one, and then how do you make sure that something is also one-handed usable for all those situations? And just in the US alone, there's 21 million people that experience that. Um, uh, Out of the entire population. So by not addressing that, you miss 21 million people in just the US alone. So I was talking with one of the people on this program, and I said, "Well, what's the big challenge for you at work?" And she says, "I have ADD." I said, "Well, what do you do about it?" And she says, "I go on a 10-kilometer run every morning, and that calms me down." And I said, that makes a lot of sense. Um, when you think about it, so there's a bit of research that's come out about this, and there's plenty more. But there's this 2009 study of children with ADHD, and all they did is just take them on a walk in the park, and then when they sat down, they scored 13.37 higher percent on the test. Um, this makes sense because I went to 10 different schools as a kid, and the schools that had us go crazy outside, run all over the place, where we had three recesses, we did a lot better at sitting perfectly still, with, perfectly straight in it was a Catholic school, to make sure that we were focused and we had to get all of our energy out. Um, but more importantly, in the park versus a city center, um, as Mark Weiser, who's one of the coiners of the term calm technology, said, there's just as much information in a crowded cityscape as there is in a, a, a forest or a jungle. It's just the way in which that information is presented is either super annoying or calming. And um, the way in which information in a park is presented is lots of fractals, natural light filtering through the trees. If you were to actually build this from scratch, it would be extremely expensive to hand make all of these light filtering things that move in the wind. So there's so much going on to affect our peripheral attention. There's lots of bird sounds. There's lots of different variable textures that it gets us into a totally different state, and that I don't believe we're attention deficit. I believe that there's not enough information in our environments um, to versus the past, and that's what's causing us to be upset. So in the Victorian era, people were going inside and living inside. for the first time, really, really inside a lot. And of course, it's not the Victorian era, but it's an idea of um, everything had nature on the inside. And if you were a wealthy person in the past, your chateau would be filled with nature. If you had a very old drafty castle, you would commission an oil painter to put a huge painting of a beautiful summerscape in your house so that you could stare at it when it was so dark and awful inside. Um, but everything had all this texture and carved wood, and it was all this testament to nature. And even the colors in the Victorian times, Scheele's green and some of these greens that people would put on their walls with Morris's wallpaper. Um, People loved that green because they wanted nature inside their homes. The problem is making fake green was made with arsenic, and people died from it. People would wear a green dress of arsenic and lace, and that's where we got the term fashion victim. Someone actually dying from from the arsenic and lace. Um, so this era, full of all of this, this was the last era in which, in more of the European sense, we had all of this texture on the inside, and then we went into this era of speed, and so you still have all of this biophilia, but it's flat, and this was the first era of flatness of real flatness in this kind of sense, what we might call modern era. And then the real modern era, this is from a film called Playtime from 1967 by Jacques Tati, who is a French filmmaker, mostly a comedian. And here's this guy walking through this crazy modern environment. This entire thing and the entire city that he built was a set about Paris in the future. Um, and everything was flat, everything was confusing. All of the computers made weird sounds. Nothing made any sense, and there was escalators and pane glass windows everywhere. This basically came true. He's just very much ahead of its time, and this is one of my favorite films ever. It's hilarious. Yeah, it's everything that we're experiencing today, but from 1967. Um, and so I believe our lack of texture is making our minds anxious. In this place, it's basically a non-place. A person in this place has no identity, has no relation to anything else, and has no real history. The place doesn't really either. And Marc Auger, who's a French philosopher, wrote this book about non-places. And in a sense, when we're in a traffic jam, we're in a non-place where we have no identity with relation to anything else except for our vehicle make and model. We don't have any relationship to any of the other cars except for somewhat antagonisms, and we don't really have any history because a highway is not meant to be lived in, it's meant to pass through. So we end up in these liminal spaces betwixt and between here and there, and we don't really have any place to rest, and our mind keeps expecting information. Where's the information? In a place like this, if you were to go in nature, it would be dead. You would want to run away because there's no life. And so this sensory deprivation is actually very anxiety inducing because our minds are expecting a lot more input. Wind, weather, light, change, animals, sounds, all of that's gone. You just get typewriters. Um, so our lack of texture is making our minds anxious, and most tech feels more like an alien species than it does something in our natural environment. So here's, some nice landscaping, and here's a very nice heat pump, but it looks like an alien creature pod landed on someone's house. Um, to make this look nice, you could put a wrought iron grate around it that's like has beautiful filigrees of nature and then you could grow vines on it. And what that would do is hide this, but it would also reduce the amount of ambient noise that came from it, and so you wouldn't hear it as much as you approach the house. Um, Here's an example of a drain that actually works better than just a regular flat drain with grooves. It has some biophilia in it. It looks kind of like water, but on this extremely boring part of a street with just concrete slab, this is visually interesting. Also, it's not cut in a way that a dog can get their paws caught in it. I've had trouble with like, small dogs where they fall into the grate when I have to pick them up, and they're always really embarrassed. Um, so neuroergonomics is how it feels to use something. So it's not just how it feels to be in a place around something, but how it feels to use something. So here we have the beloved Leica camera, or any other camera for that matter. Any analog camera has physical buttons. Look at all of the texture on this. The texture is there to make sure that you don't drop it when you're holding it. Also, look at all the slight ridges on almost every dial so that you can use your fingertip and very easily adjust. And when you're using the camera, it might take a while to learn how to use. A camera is not intuitive, um, but once you get used to it, you look through it and you use your hands to understand so that everything is about the view and the viewfinder. So it leaves your entire understanding of the world open and can help you see more if you use it well, especially analog. Um, and then, of course, we have something that's kind of on the edge. It's still flat-ish design when this Razr phone came out in 2003, but they also laser etched all these little cherry blossoms onto it. So this was the phone with a biophilic design on it. It became extremely popular. I ended up having this phone, and I was babysitting for the first time in college. This kid, I was always babysitting. It was the first time that the kid would be away from their parents. So, of course, it was always a very scary thing, you know. Um, but I noticed that the mom had the same phone as me, just in lavender. And so I said, take out your phone, go on the call, and I took out my phone and I went on a fake call. And we just let the baby look at us. And once the baby realized that we both had the same phone, the baby just jumped into my arms and I was good. And the mom left. And it was a really interesting thing to like transfer that intimacy and trust through the idea that we both had the same phone, that there was some continuation of trust through a stranger. Um, So tech should really be engaging more of our peripheral attention. And I just need to check the time because I don't want to take up too much of the time here. Um, so tactile paving, really annoying if you have a rolly bag because you have to roll over it. On the other hand, you don't really have to pay too much attention in order to understand, hey, there's a step here or there's a subway. And if you're blind, you can tap this with a cane. And in some places, like many train stations, many parts of Japan, you can navigate an entire city just through this tactile paving. Um, and there's different raised surfaces that you can tap that are variable so that you can understand where you are. Um, Natural materials are also really, really important. We're going to release Calm Tech for Spaces this week, which is based on a lot of this research and much more that I can't fit into the presentation. But one of the aspects of materials is called material honesty. Um, there is an idea of, you're a lion in the zoo and you're pacing around because you look at the back of the exhibit and it's just a two-dimensional wall decal of your environment pasted behind you. And I feel like most human experience right now, for many people, unless they're growing up in like a historic home or with their families or part of an actual original culture, is basically having a two-dimensional, with like your white walls or your millennial gray or your luxury vinyl plank flooring is having a two-dimensional representation of the real nature pasted in your environment. And so, in a sense, we're kind of all living in these sensory deprivation tanks, these kind of zoos. And material honesty is a way to bring that back. So, I have this container for my grandma, which is it's just spiky and it's diffused light and it's amber colored glass and it's made of proper glass. And so I always remind myself like, oh, I can touch this. Everything will be okay. So many spikes. It's just a wonderful object. Now you wouldn't buy this online and say, "Wow," but if you feel it, I can feel how it's almost like it's almost again like a screensaver, taking out all of the annoying interfaces that I have to stare at all day when I touch that. Um, but that's what I mean when I talk about material honesty. Um, and then objects with texture all over Kyoto, especially, you have objects with texture helping the mind feel at ease and making more enjoyable and memorable experiences, or at least just allowing people to deal with human life, which can be a little complicated. But look how miniaturized all of these are. It's not like really big pebbles on the sides, like really tiny ones. And look at all these tiny little stars. And oh, look, it's beautiful rice paper, and you're diffusing the light through it. And a lot of times if I try to open these, I look outside and there's like a terrible HVAC system. It's like a horrible view. And that's why it's been placed there, so that it can kind of soften that view in a lot of cases. In some cases, it's an even more beautiful view. But what I've found interesting about most of this is that the scale is so much different. The miniature scale makes you feel, makes when you're approaching it, it's like, oh, it's so cute and small, and you don't feel so overwhelmed. Whereas if you went to the United States and went to like a cheesecake factory, everything is meant to be like so much volume that it would swallow you whole, and you're supposed to be in a state of awe, like a temple of cheesecake. And proportionality is used totally differently all over the world. But using this smaller dimensionality can be really delightful. One of the reasons why I decided to get into miniatures was because if I'm really stressed out at the end of the day, I can look at a box of miniature items like a little tiny store, and I feel okay again. And when I went to Japanese gardens, and it was guided through the proper experience, you have basically a miniature of reality, and you meditate and become one with the garden, and then it feels like everything's super big. It feels like, here are these little rocks, but no, it's this huge experience um, of the experience that you might experience being in front of an ocean or being in front of a huge set of fjords in Norway. And that gets the brain out of this like little tiny repetitive state and gets you into more of a metacognition about what's really important or not. Um, so here's an example on a printer copy machine. Look at all these crazy looking icons. Like, does anyone remember these icons? Like, we don't think about these icons, but there is a small dot and a raised button that's in a divot well, surrounded by plastic that's been pitted to have texture for the start button, and the stop button has a bar. That's it. This is a really, really successful design. Part of it was anthropologist Lucy Suchman, who was talking about how engineers were making these printer copy machines so that you could do anything with them. And she said people just really need a big green button. But more importantly, you could have a conversation while running a copy machine because your hands do the work and not your eyes. And yeah, you can feel from, oh, suddenly the surface is like pitted in plastic and now it's smooth. Um, this is my friend's entry system, and at night you can't see it. You have to turn on your phone and look. And he was dating someone who was blind, and so he put these two little raised bumps so that she knew in the dark, with her super, super low vision, to be able to enter the house. That's it. But it worked out incredibly well. So sometimes when we design things for uh, different vision levels and assume that everything isn't perfect, like it looks like in advertising, then we get so much more um, in terms of delight and usefulness. This is a Bosch range, not designed by Dieter Rams, I hope, but I've seen so many people who they made enough money and they're older and they're going to get the most beautiful Bosch range and it's like 5,000 pounds to buy this, and then suddenly um, every single button, because it's not a raised articulated button, in order to show that you press the button, emits an incredibly sharp beep. So a lot of times when I find people in houses like this, I'll give them the like page 19 of the user manual to show them how to turn off the beep. Um, Also, if it's a mess. But it's super easy to clean. The problem is if you use too much cleaner, you could wipe off all of the markings on your stove and you can't see it anymore. And you can't do that with physical buttons. This is a Japanese startup out of Kyoto. They use a real thin veneer of wood cut so thin that you can see this LED matrix behind it, and it's one of the earliest wood-based touchscreens. So it's a home controller for your house. You can leave messages. Um, this is Mudita. So this is an alarm clock, and it has lots and lots of physical buttons on it, and dials, and like a little tiny orange marking that pops up when your alarm is on, and it has really nice sound design. It's very easy to travel with and delightful to use because you just turn the knob on the top if you want to set your alarm, but it has like a tiny, like almost imperceptible click, so it feels really good. And so now I can't really use any other alarm than this. So we're seeing very slowly real texture and buttons come back to products. This thing is really silly. It's time timer. This is beloved by a bunch of people, but all you do is you take that thing in the middle is a dial, and you just turn it to show the amount of time you want to time, and then it's done. So then it'll slowly count down this circle. This is really good for kids who can't tell time yet, or people doing homework, or you can store it across the room and you can see it in your peripheral environment. Also, the colors are delightful, and the cases can be made with anything. Um, that's very, very fun. And then the Remarkable tablet, it feels like paper, and it's been shown by, so I'm on the board of Remarkable with three neuroscientists, and what one of them has shown is that it doesn't matter what surface you're writing on, but if you write, you can take 5 times less notes to have the same memories. So it's actually the act of writing that is allowing your brain to remember more because each letter that you write has a specific shape, whereas if you type, every single letter feels the same under your fingertips. So the big difference is writing something down versus typing is massively different in how your brain interprets information and stores it. So this offers that benefit, especially for reading PDFs. So I think what we're seeing and what we'll see soon is the revenge of the real. Sometimes as a group of people, depending on what group of people you're in, we have to have things get taken away or we have to destroy them in order to understand what's valuable. Um, of course, Meow Wolf and all these super interactive hand-built exhibits are getting very popular because there's lots of information in the space instead of less, and they're actually not overwhelming. They have all of these neurodivergent and autism training, so they actually are relaxing for people. Even though they don't look like it, it's actually this much information feels more like nature to the mind, and so you might bring in a bunch of kids that would normally fight, and they won't fight in this type of space because there's enough information. So we're seeing more and more of the experience economy, especially after COVID, and I think it's really important that we have more information in our environments, not less, to feel calm. Um, so this invisible information in our periphery affects us in a couple different ways. Um, the first way is this material honesty. The material that we have in our environment affects us. And if it's dishonest and fake, it doesn't feel very good. There's something wrong deeply. Um, and then I'm trying to show people that it's more valuable to put fractals and green spaces into workplaces. And so you have to really talk about it in terms of like return on investment, unfortunately. But you can't just say this is good because people don't really buy stuff based on goods. If they're doing this at, a huge hotel, they have to say, will there be more customer satisfaction? Can I charge more for the room? Will I get better ratings? Will I have less people be sick at work? These are the things that people care about. Um, so this was a study called Windows and Offices, Worker Performance and Environment. They had some of they had some people with a bunch of Windows. They had some people that didn't have access to Windows. I'm glossing over this research a little bit, I'm sorry. But what they showed is that the ones that had natural light um, had faster task handling, more productivity, and most importantly, the payback was in 4 months. So it's, when somebody says, "Oh, we don't have enough money to put windows in for our employees," well, actually, you can have access to natural light. I think that's human right. Um, so here's an example. This is okay natural light. This is better. You should have fractals and biophilia out the window. And mostly there's something moving in this environment. There's birds, there's interesting things that happen. And when things get dull or terrible, or you're processing something really annoying on a computer, being able to look up and change your vision instead of super short to very far is really, really important. Here's an example from the body shop. Okay, so this is not real, of course, but it's just a green wall. And hilariously, even if you put fake green, the mind still responds to it, unlike wood. Unlike, it has to be real-ish enough. But what happens is that if you put green behind your products, people will pay more. Um, they will pay more for the same product in a green environment. Okay. The other thing that I found is that people will be less likely to go home sick if there's green in the environment. Hooray. But it's the idea of instead of having a sterile, horrible corporate environment or a shopping mall, having some variability in the environment helps provide some of what the mind needs, so it isn't just this dull situation. Um, Another really, really important part is CO2 and cognition. So what's in your air actually affects how you think. Um, so typical score of an outside CO2 might be 450 to 550 ppm, parts per million. That's like nice fresh air, pretty much. In New York City, it might be a little bit higher because there's more CO2 and there's more NO2. But what this research found was that decision-making scores dropped 15 to 50% when CO2 was raised from 600 ppm, mostly outside, to 1,000, so 15% drop, and 1,400 ppm in a controlled office. Um, this is intense, and the largest declines were in crisis response, information seeking, and strategy tasks. So think about being in a closed conference room at 3 p.m. filled with I've seen levels of 2,000, 3,000 CO2 ppm, and people are trying to make a decision or think. There's a reason why, you have different classes like, every 45 minutes as a kid, you don't get out of there. And I even got really mad. I was at a very big fancy company, a search engine company in their new New York offices. And I said, the CO2 is too high in this room and trying to make decisions. We need to take a break and we need to move around. And everyone felt it, that the air was stale. But they couldn't, as we kept staying in the room, the idea of leaving became too much of a decision to make, and our decision making got worse and worse. Um, so this one had a variable test to simulate green buildings at different ppm levels. So they did this with 24 participants and over 6 days. So this was all about talking about just ventilation. All you have to do is increase your ventilation. Um, so a lot of that is making first the invisible visible. So this is another Calm Tech certified device called the AirThings Wave Pro. It's about 8-month battery life. It's got, you can wave your hand in front of it and it'll tell you whether the air is good or bad, and it's got e-ink. Um, but once you hit a certain CO2 threshold, it'll change color, also test 7 other things, and you can know whether you should take a break. Um,
Hey, Case,
yeah,
we have 8 minutes left and we have
okay,
a
I'm
bunch
gonna
of
stop.
questions in chat. I
Yeah.
don't want you to stop though. So
No,
good.
it's good. Maybe I'll wrap up though. So there's a bunch of research about different office design, biophilia, and the Savannah principle in this office. Um, Talent attraction, putting time, old stone into this. People wanted to come to the office more. Good ROI. People like wood, hooray. Um, and then daylight in schools, people learn faster, 20 to 26% faster in natural daylight. Our tech is poisoning our time, and it's invisible. How can we design for a better future of human experience? Yay, Gold Tech certified. We made this thing. Um, and I have some books, and there's a website, calmtech.institute. The end. See, I wrapped up fine.
Incredible. Yes. I feel like I just got a download on so much interesting research and cool stuff and things that like I felt like intuitively I sensed, but it's like so nice to be like research. But on that, so Brian, you were first in chat, so feel free to unmute, add some voice to your question, but maybe let's try to go rapid fire. I think Brian, Ann and I have a similar question, so then we'll go us if we can rapid fire, Ruth Anna, Hema. Let's do it. Brian, go for it.
Oh yeah, okay. So mine was the question about the relationship between like scaling things and like localized complexity and how we make these textural things available to a large number of people when that localized complexity might be challenging with scaling. I don't know. I guess just trying to think about that relationship between the two.
Hmm. Oh yeah, that's a great question. The question is like, does quality scale? And how can you do this at scale? So I found that hilariously Marriott, their like Bonvoy series, because I'm about 180 days a year on the road, I have to experience these non-places most of the time. They have what I call minimum viable texture, where their interior designers have figured out like we have so many business travelers, they're going to go insane if we don't put this texture in. And so they're really leading the charge, and they do a good job. But I think a lot of times it's like in a small neighborhood, you don't want all the houses to look the same. You don't want to have an HOA that makes everything bland and minimal. You want to allow enough, 20 to 30% or more for people to make things how they are, like human scale. And that's what makes like um uh what's the neighborhood in Brooklyn that's like really fun that has House of Yes. I forgot what neighborhood that is. If anyone's
Bushwick?
from New Bushwick, that's what makes Bushwick way more fun than like downtown Manhattan. Is because we did a sensory walk at a World Experience Organization conference where I said, take off your name tags, we're not going to talk to each other at all the entire time. You can't talk. And we walked, and about 15 minutes in, everyone was feeling really dumb. And then we started to notice all of the different little things in the Bushwick environment that everybody was doing. Um, and instead of antagonistic, so many people thought, it'd be antagonistic to not talk, or that people would sell us stuff, or like I was like we would get offered drugs. I don't know. Like people had these ideas. Instead, everyone was just so wonderful. Every local was just like you could see how much joy there was because there was much more that was being done in the environment, all the little detail. And then we tried to do this walk um, in a very new part of Oslo, Norway, and it was extremely depressing. And we had to get to a park as quickly as possible. And in about 20 minutes in, we all became like children again because you notice all the things. We started running around and being doofy. And everyone came back and they said, oh, like I haven't done that in like 30 years. So I think a lot of it is just some hotels, some offices, I can actually like judge their culture whether they're going to have either mass layoffs or, really really good delivery or joy, based on how silly their office environments are. I used to work at the old Pixar office in Point Richmond, California, which got turned into a Microsoft services office that I worked at, and you could still see, before they became so official, all the little graffiti everywhere, and all the little cartoons. I sat at a desk and like, oh look at this, this is like a Buzz Lightyear that somebody drew in the wall in the corner, and it was just like stuffed with fractals of creativity. The density was just amazing, all the little practical jokes and things like that. And then you look at the new Pixar headquarters, and they actually had to make a secret zone in the back because so many people were taking a tour. Oh, it's so beautiful, and steel and this and glass. And they made a secret zone where it could be messy because the idea was that, oh, you can only do things if it's clean. It's like, no, no, no. And even under the library at Reed College was this like terrible pit of doom and smelliness, which produced so many millionaires, because it was, you could go there anytime. It was probably a stinky couch down there, like a bunch of junk, but it's where you could be yourself. And so, it's also why, like Ace Hotel, for instance, it kind of looks disheveled, but there's so much time in it that you don't feel anxious. And it's kind of shabby chic, like it has old and new together. Sorry, this is a really long answer, but it's why people get so relaxed around, like an old diner. And I call it like time travel as relaxation. If you're stressed out, just go back in time.
Mhm.
To, and to me, going back in time is just like something that's not a condo that looks like a cruise ship that's, for the soul, that's set up on ground. That those things are armchair investments, space filling architecture. They look like tumorous, industrial blots on the landscape of our souls. Like they're the worst thing. Like to me, a huge tumorous piece of undifferentiated condo. Um, it to me that's indicative of something horribly wrong with society. And, so I'm trying to, make proof that that's not the way to be, and that people will treat that architecture poorly, and all of those will become slums, for lack of a better term, in the future, and it's bad for everybody.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Case. And I know we're at time now, so if you have to jump off, then thank you for coming, and we hope to see you at another Metagov seminar. If folks want to stay on, there are some great questions in chat. And yeah, I think I even just to follow up quickly on that point, I was just noodling during your presentation about like what this has to do with governance and community self-governance. And what you just said, like, really hits home at my second question, and similar to Anne's question, is like, what is the role that we communities can play to advocate for this ComTech design in our environments, digitally and in person? Like, yeah, what have you seen as ways that, we can have power over our environments and advocate and like build more of a texture rich environment for ourselves. Like, what does that have to do with community self-governance?
Yeah. So anytime armchair investor hears the word advocate, they say they're going to stop me from building my building, and I need to make money for my armchair investors in my REIT. So learn the language of the people and their incentives. They do not care. They just don't. They care about sending their kid to a good school and their yacht race against Larry Ellison of Oracle. They do not care. They want to have a human scale life with their kid that doesn't really like them, but they buy them. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I've met too many of these people. Now I have started to get a lot of inquiries, and now that I live in Denver and there's a lot of urban planning, a lot of things to do, I'm in a specifically set up urban planning community, that's done a really good job at this, which has been great. But it's really about understanding the incentives to allow people to purchase these add-ons or invest in this type of infrastructure, which is why, you know, if you say, hey, we built this new type of thing, it's going to cost this much more, but it's going to reduce X, Y, and Z. Rent is going to be this and actually it's less to maintain, and this, and you show it quantitatively, and you show it with the research, then someone can say, I feel safe to invest in this. Because again, right now, the tumor plots on the landscape are a numbers game. And there are very few architecture design firms that are allowed to even think this way, even though every single architect in there and every single urban planner cares deeply about humans so badly and knows this and has Jane Jacobs' Life and Death of American Cities in their back pocket and hates Robert Moses and what he did to the landscape with cars. Like, everyone cares. But if they don't have the evidence and the information um, to do this, then it doesn't work. And that's why, I interviewed one of the people that wrote the first draft of LEED certified from 1989. And I said, why did LEED take off and all these other things that are, morally good did not? And he said, well, when green came out as a concept, everyone just threw it around, but LEED allowed it to be quantified for the first time. One of the things on LEED is the indoor air should be no more than 100 ppm above the outside ambient air. So with capacity. So let's say you have 35 capacity and you measure the outside air, it's 550 ppm. The indoor air should be 650 ppm, and you get a point. What that means is you can do whatever kind of HVAC system you want to make the 5 cycles per air to make it clean. And you need a good filtration system as well. But it doesn't matter which way you do it. So you could use an old Babylonian system for that, which is more effective than most general systems that is 2,000 years old, and you'll still get LEED certified. Um, but the way that they translated that was really interesting. And so a lot of how I'm trying to do Calm-Tech certified for product level and then for the spaces level is to take that research and to make it measurable so that you get a point or you don't get a point. And now clients are saying, how do I get another point? So I had a client say, how do we get this point? I said, well, you need FSC certified, Sustainable Forestry Initiative packaging that's recyclable. And they said, okay. And they said, our new product is going to have this recyclable packaging. And I said, yes, because then all the industrial designers said, we wanted recycled packaging. We already did the research. But they said, well, we don't have money for that. And I said, well, you don't get Calm-Tech certified platinum. I'm sorry. And the whole thing for years and years was, how does somebody get LEED platinum? Because if you're in a LEED platinum building, more people will want to work there, right? Well, now you have to do good. So in a way, it's a Trojan horse trick to get people that are economically incentivized and trained not to care to be economically incentivized to care again. And I got Peter Stiglitz, the Nobel laureate in economics, who wrote Globalization and Discontents. I'm bad with faces and names, and so he was sitting alone in a party, and I just went up to him and I was like, "Hi, can I run something by you?" And I was like, "Here's the economic structure of this." And he asked me all these questions, and I was like, "No one's ever asked me this good of questions. Can I read? Do you have a book?" And he was like, "It's Peter Stiglitz." Um, but it was nice to know that if you think in, if you play the game a little bit, um, I could say, I'm a grassroots advocate that cares deeply about X, and someone would say, leave our town council meeting. Like, like we don't want to talk with you. You're getting get in the way. Or I could say, here's the proof that this will reduce your property maintenance and crime by treating people better. You don't need a flock camera. You could just I feel like space, like access to natural light and ventilation, and you're going to have less people wanting to drink a ton of alcohol to get enough energy to deal with that space because it's so atrocious. There's so many, and I live on the edge of one of the lowest income communities, and then right between like a super high income community. I'm just on the edge, right? So I go to both neighborhoods and I always try to live on these boundaries because I don't want to live in either one. I'm not either one. I'm an anthropologist. I don't fit anywhere. But I can see across the street right now, I can see the kind of color rendering index on the pre-installed lights at this really, 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 really upsetting apartment complex. And I just care for all the people that have to be subjected to this environment because and you know, the default lights installed in my place, like I just feel terrible when I turn them on because they don't actually reflect all the colors of reality. And I didn't even go into how light affects people. So I just changed the light in my environment and now I think differently. And I changed, you know, I have an air filtration system or keep the window open at night or, you know, all these things I can actually measure. And I know some probably all of you know Dr. Michael Zargum, but I basically built a house like a little like a spaceship out in his backyard and lived in it for a couple years. And I did all of these data analysis with all these like little tools to see what was really affecting my sleep. It was a bad idea, mostly because I was the subject. I wouldn't recommend. Um, and then I learned just how important it was to have standard air temperature regulation. And the reason why, you know, you might have had a really tall environment in the past, tall house environment, is that it's better for CO2. Its wallpaper has all of those like biophilia and fractals. You have wainscoting that draws your eye around a big room. Every single culture and every single history has like beautiful decoration that's suited to geography. And you know, and most of us, you know, I can see some of your backgrounds. It's like my background is empty, so I put this hand painted crazy light fixture in the back, you know, to provide something. Um, but anyway, yeah, so that's a really long answer to that question. Um,
Oh no, thank you. This is great. If folks want to stay on, maybe we go for another until 1:15. I'll make sure we get cut off then. But Ruthanna, if you wanna, you're next in the queue. Ask your question.
I want to make sure that I'm
So
not.
the question was fundamentally about matching tech to neurodiversity. Because all the things you're saying, they resonate very strongly with me, and I am also someone who is constantly sensory seeking, and I'm paying attention through the talk by playing with fidget. But I have a lot of people in my life who are sensory seeking and a lot who are sensory avoidant and get easily overwhelmed, and many people who are one of these things at some point and one of these things an hour later. And so, is there some way to build that into the certification, the ability to adapt to different levels of sensory need at different times? Because this is not something that is universal either between individuals or within the same individual under different circumstances. So,
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because again, under the Trojan horse, I can't use any of that terminology. I can in very specific presentations. This was a demo. This was a sorry, I had to rehearse this talk on all of you. I'm going to a secret internal Google conference for neurodivergent architecture and design this weekend, and I'll be presenting this as the keynote. So I have to like cut it down a little bit. But your question is really valid because, of course, there is a sense that not everybody has the same needs at the same time, and it fluctuates. And you know, so half of it is the environment can help, but if the environment is bad, then it's how I dealt with it as a kid. Um, oh, sorry, there's noise. How I dealt with it as a kid, and I have all of the things, right? Like I can't label myself as that, or they won't let me into certain environments. So I had a notebook with pens, and I was always in these terrible spaces, and I would draw. And if I needed to learn something, I would draw or I would write. I was often in really low income healthcare clinics because my mom was sick all the time and they were really bad. And I'd be waiting and it'd be really noisy. Most of the time I put wadded up pieces of paper in my ears because I can't keep the earplugs around because I lose them all the time. They're too small. Um, I wear a hat, I wear sunglasses, I wear sunscreen, I wear materials that don't have a lot of seams in them because they're irritating. I wear natural materials. Like, I make sure that I have organization and structure and like drop places. I have like these little metal drawers, and the top drawer has a segmentation of everything, and there's like sunglasses, sunscreen, like all of the pieces, and it's all in a drawer. And so when I need to go, I open up drawer F01, literally they're numbered, and I open that, and within that, that's the go, and then everything's stored in like little pouches, and I put those together, and then it's complete, and it's gone. And I took a lot of classes on this in college, where they give you the test. They're like, if you're neurodivergent, you get to take all these classes and learn these things. And they had all of these special speakers come in that was like, if you're neurodivergent, you're more likely to start a successful company. And I was like, is that true or not? Doesn't matter. Um, so, in a lot of this, just on the texture part, if you have more natural materials and texture and your sound and your light and all of these things are calibrated properly, and you have error and light and things like that, it's going to go so far for everyone, no matter what their localized need, to have like a 15 to 20% better experience, which is the difference between hearing something really annoying beep in the background when you're driving or um, when you're in a school environment and being super overwhelmed and then just having a meltdown, and being like, that's annoying, but it's not as annoying as it could be, and I can tolerate that for a little bit longer. Also depends on how much sleep you've had. So if you can't sleep, like sometimes I can't sleep, I didn't sleep last night. Okay. Like, so I know today that I'm going to much more sensitive to sound, so I need to wear earplugs and noise canceling headphones. If I lose my noise canceling headphones, I'm in a huge issue. And the nice thing today is that all of these things that people wear actually look kind of cool now. Like, you can wear Bose headphones. Like, and I was just thinking about, oh, it's expensive. Like, if I don't wear this, then I'll look at my phone and then I'll click on some stupid ad on Instagram and I'll spend the equivalent of the Bose headphones on something dumb that I hate that clutters my environment. So, so a lot of it's like, what's my return on investment? So yeah, and it's hard, because, I don't want to talk about human universals, but when you build a bridge, you don't build it for someone that's like this, and this, and this, and this. You build it for people. And you build it with the idea that it still stays up even though the weather has fluctuated and there's too many people on the bridge or there's a huge parade or a protest. And you close it when it gets within a certain, percentage of that tolerance. And you overbuild it so that when the contractors who nibble out all of the little tiny chunks of it so that they can undercut each other and get accepted by the State Department, it still holds up under those conditions. And so I'm trying to do that. And I do get a lot of emails for people who are like, do you know you're advocating for the blind? Do you know you're advocating for the deaf? No, no, no. I'm like, yes, shh, don't tell anyone because it will backfire. Because people say, oh no, I'm optimizing for neurodivergence, therefore I'm like woke or something. It's like, I'm not advocating for anything. I'm just rewarding people that put, raised dots on their home entry system because it's better for the mind and there's neuroscience in the back. So it's a lot of translating into that. And I'm
Yeah, this
also,
whole space maybe worth using the nonsense of learning styles, because if you say neurodiversity, then people think, oh, I'm not neurodiversity. But if you say like different mental types, then everyone knows that they're a mental type, and we can adjust it to you and you and you and you and you.
yes, and also if you just have a good environment, there's less adjustment necessary. Like, um, and it's not to say that like nature is always good. It's like you go to Australia and it's just like, I'm like, oh, that stupid bird again. But then, you put, um, yeah, so Adam wrote, that'd be cool to provide a sensory score to your own products and feature. Yeah. I do want to do that. I just have to call it not sensory score. it's under the materials category. I have to be really, really careful. Also just like completely non-political, because I want everyone to be able to enjoy these products on every side. So you will not see any content of either side on any of these things at all, ever, throughout the entire history of my social media going back to like 2008. Um, because I don't want anybody to get stuck or left out. And Yeah, the sensory score is really interesting, and that's what the calm text for spaces is. It's like, is it, material honesty? That's part of the sensory score. And then what is sensory score? Well, it's light, and uh, and I have like a 5600 Kelvin light over the side here, and it's a very high color render index. So as you can see, I look very like different from my background, which is lit with a different thing. It's all gray. This is great. But I'll notice if I'm doing something really boring and I turn that light on, I'm okay because it
Mm.
looks like sunlight. So there's so many different things. Somebody on the chat said, or points for adjustability. You do get points for adjustability,
Mm.
so that you can make it to your own. There's another post that you might want to read called Design is Governance, which is all about if you make decisions for someone, you can't adjust. But if you go into a car, you can adjust your seat. You can adjust the rearview mirror with like the smallest action. And that to me is very, very important. Whereas you can't do that in so many other experiences. And that's why cars, even though they are a blight on the landscape, and public transit's way better because it's the original self-driving car, um, you know, is pretty interesting. Thanks for being here, everyone, and yeah, let's close out.
Thank you so much, Case. That was so much fun, and we should continue discussions in the Metagov seminar channel of our Slack. I'll start a thread and bring over any unanswered questions in the chat. But yes, thank you so much. If everyone could give a round of applause, either unmute or send some claps and love to Case. Thank you so much for being here, and have a great day, everyone. See
Thanks.
you next week.
Bye.
Clap explosion.
That was great.